Welcome back to another episode of The Loco Fit Show, where we redefine what healthy means to you. I'm your host, Laurin Conlon, and today I'm joined by Rick, our team mental health consultant, to talk through navigating working in an just a highly emotional career. I don't even want to say emotionally draining, but highly emotional careers can be very emotionally draining.
Dealing with intense careers, that are highly emotional. You talked about, being a coach, being a therapist, being a nurse, a firefighter, a paramedic, a police officer, a doctor. I think all careers, and this is an important part, to start to distinguish between like stress and emotional stress. I think every career comes with a certain amount of stress. Like you can be an accountant and for 4 or 5 months out of the year, you're like pulling your hair out. We have a friend of ours, Jeff, who's a lobbyist. Between like January and May, he's like living in Tallahassee, but his family's in Tampa, and he's constantly traveling, and all jobs come with stress. And so I think it's important to understand from any perspective, what are your coping strategies for managing stress and anxiety, first and foremost? And then understanding too that for other careers like a nurse or a coach, you're going to be taking on a big part of the stress is the emotional turmoil that comes with working with clients. And so how do you compartmentalize that to a certain extent, and how do you distance yourself from it so that every single day you're not bringing home with you the emotional distress of other people into your relationships, into your life. And this is a skill to develop and redefine constantly and consistently. One of my biggest pet peeves is the term self-care. And what I hate about that term is people use it so flippantly, and they think like, all right, I'm going to work 14 straight days, and then I'm just going to go take one day for a spa day, and I'm going to feel re-energized, and I'm going to be de-stressed. It's like, you're not. You're fooling yourself into doing that. Self-care is something that is done every single day. Living a healthier lifestyle. Saying to myself, being aware of this career deals with these issues, and I have these problems to deal with, and I have these emotions to deal with, and I have these people to deal with. What is my plan for separating that from when I leave to when I come home and it's not affecting me and my family or my relationships or my social career? And so I think one of the things that people don't do a great job of is implementing self-care on a daily basis. How are you setting boundaries? How are you utilizing your time? What are you doing to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue, right? Because these are all things that affect anybody who's a first responder, and especially that. How are you managing the trauma that you're experiencing from some of your clients?
Yeah, that's a whole different level when we're talking about that, because a lot of times people are going to die. And there's nothing that you can do about it, but you do feel like you should have, right? And that's natural, because if you're involved in that, most people are going to feel a sense of that. I mean, of course, the military deals with this on a very large basis as well. And, a lot of people will just tune it out, and they'll just, some of the best, the darkest humor I know is from people who are first responders or the military, which of course is hilarious and enjoyable. But you're like, damn, I know why you developed this, because part of it is a coping strategy, because you can't just feel everything. If you feel every single thing, then you're not going to be able to make it. But at the same time, okay, you're hardening yourself at work to be able to get through it and to perform your duty. But then what happens when you get home, right? It's not just a switch to be like, I'm going to be this hardened person at work to do the job. But then when I come home, I'm just like, oh, I'm totally different. And I'm this emotionally in tune person. That takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but it is very challenging. It's not something that you can just expect to accidentally happen. Mm-hmm. And that's a really great point about, self-care. And I think a lot of people think self-care is just, I'm going to go on a vacation. And it's like, that's great. Like working really hard and going on vacations and completely decompressing is all great. I'm here for it. But what are you doing, to your point, on a daily basis to manage that? And it's not just about acts of self-care. It's about setting boundaries. It's about knowing how to communicate. It's about, what are the behaviors that I'm doing or not doing that make me feel better or feel worse? Mm-hmm. How are you managing all of that? Because if you know that I'm going to have a really hard day and now I've stacked 5 terrible behaviors on top of each other, well, you're probably not going to be able to handle the next day very well. And that's understandable. Mm-hmm. But you can't continue to do that. And you do that for years and years and years. And you look up and you're like, why am I this broken person, emotionally, spiritually, physically, like, well, that's why. And I'm not faulting anybody for it, because that is the way that most people are coping with it. But if you find yourself in that situation, that's why.
Well, and when you start to dive into those things that you just said, like I'll ask somebody who's coming to me who's really stressed out, and I'll start to explore those areas. I'll say, okay, emotionally, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Spiritually, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Physically, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Right? Psychologically, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are you doing to remove or distance or compartmentalize or process or maneuver through some of these emotions? And what I find is people are doing nothing, and then they expect the vacation to be the end all be all. And it's like, look, 2 weeks in Tahiti does not take away from the last 6 or 7 months of trauma that you just experienced. And so it's like, are you breathing on a daily basis? Are you doing some meditation? Are you exercising? Are you monitoring your diet? Are you getting a healthy amount of sleep? Are you processing and talking about your emotions? Are you reading? Are you providing outlets for your stress and your anxiety? And if you're like, yeah, no, I'm not doing any of those things, guess what's going to happen? You're going to hit a brick wall, or you're going to be like, I'm burned out. I think I stopped keeping track. I wanted to say I stopped around like 40% of the people that I graduated with from my graduate class. 40% of them are no longer in the psychology field. They've gone on to other things. In that 11 years, 10 years at this point, they're realtors. They started their own businesses, Etsy's or whatever it is. One works for an accountant. Several of them went into real estate. Like, people are just like, I'm done. Like, I had one friend who was just like, I don't want to deal with suicidal patients anymore. Like, I can't deal with it. I'm done. And so it's like, they had, our last one dealt on like meaning and purpose, and everybody thought they found the career for themselves because it was super meaningful and it was this like really impactful thing. You start getting into it, and everybody else's level of trauma and mental and emotional abuse and issues can take its toll on you. And if you don't know how to protect yourself, and you're not doing the things daily to do this, you're going to burn out. And burnout can look horrible in certain situations. It can lead to suicidal thoughts, ideations. It can lead to massive depression. It can lead to confusion. There's a lot of different ways that it can manifest. And so when you're dealing with something, and I think sometimes like some of our first responders, they're a difficult class to deal with because they like to be the hero. They like to be the rescuer of people, of human beings. Like, literally, that's what firefighters are supposed to be, is like, I run into burning buildings, and it's like, yeah, but there's a lot more to this. And if you're not addressing the emotional space of what it means to roll up and see a 5-year-old dead in a car crash and understand that that's going to affect you, or to see a decapitated woman, you know what I mean? Or a homeless person like die of overdose and walk up on them and see a decaying body. Like, it takes a toll. And I think people are trying to be too tough sometimes. They're trying to be too, I don't even know what the rugged or rough around some of these things. And they're not addressing the areas that this actually impacts. Like, the military are the toughest human beings on the planet, in my opinion. They're like, as far as durability goes, no one is stronger than our military. But every veteran, including like the best ones that like Tim Kennedy, Jocko Willink, they'll all talk about the things that they saw and the mental and emotional toll that it takes. Tim Kennedy's trying to draw everything he can to the awareness of the increasing suicidal rate in veterans right now. That it's like gone up like 23% from where it was. And or 23 times. I don't remember what it was. It was I remember listening to it and I was like, oh my God. And he's talking about how the military is keeping those things under wraps. You can be the toughest person in the world, but it doesn't protect you from the emotions of being a human being. And if you don't address those things, if you don't create an atmosphere for you to provide outlets for those things, they are going to consume you and they will hurt you.
And that's why when you see people who are successful post-military, like a Tim Kennedy, like a Jocko, think about all the things that they have in place, right? Think about all the things that they're doing. And that is to manage that. It's not to say that they don't feel those emotions and they're not still dealing with those burdens, but they have certain things in place to manage it. They provide outlets.
They do podcasts. They write books. They do seminars. They've started companies. They've been a part of things, right? They train. Exactly.
It's not an accident that they're doing well.
What does Jocko do every day? Doesn't he surf and do jiu-jitsu every single day of his life?
And lift weights and do a million things.
Yeah. So it's like, like, okay, here's a super soldier, right? Jocko Willink and Tim Kennedy are like both spec ops guys, special forces, the baddest dudes on the planet, like black belt in jujitsus, and they're still doing things to take care of their mental and emotional self. They're talking, they're processing, they're sharing their emotions, their thoughts, their ideas, their memories, they're expanding. Many people aren't doing that. And so if you're not doing it, you're hurting yourself.
And I think a big part of this work too is understanding to the best of your ability what you're getting into, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that some people go into it a little bit blindly, right? Maybe not necessarily a first responder or, somebody who's in the military. I mean, maybe, right? They might think, oh, I'll be able to handle it. And then until you're really there, you don't really understand the magnitude of it. But more so, especially in kind of like the psych field or the coaching field, you think, I'll be able to handle this. This is really no problem. And then people are coming to you day in and day out. And now your client load is stacking and you're not processing things and you're just booking. And all of a sudden now you have a whole like client list of people who are sharing all of their problems with you. And now you're like, how do I even deal with my own problems? Do I have my own problems? Mm-hmm. What is this? What are boundaries? And now there's so many people who are doing those types of jobs in remote capacities, right? So then it's like, there is no delineation even of like work and home, because you're just kind of like, am I at work? Am I at home? And am I doing the laundry? Am I processing things? Am I, I'm on the couch, but now I'm at this table and now I'm here. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of coaches who struggle with this because of that. They grow really quickly. They start to take on these things and then they don't necessarily know how to handle it and they don't have those outlets. So really anybody who is navigating a highly emotional career, really understand, what are you getting into? What are your limitations? And most importantly, what can you do on a daily basis to work through these things? And daily. I think that you have to have probably a multi-pronged approach with physical, mental, and spiritual. Like, mm-hmm. I think you have to tackle all of those things and not just one, right? You can't just be like, yeah, well, working out's my outlet. Okay, that's great. We know a lot of people who work out every day who still have a fuck ton of issues that they're not processing. Mm-hmm. We also know people who aren't doing anything physical, who are also only in their head or processing things that way. So I think that it is a balance of all of those things, and they don't have to be extreme things. You don't have to go on this like, yoga retreat every week and, like going back to the podcast that we just did about finding purpose, mm-hmm. Taking a few minutes a day to do something experiential. This is the same thing. We're talking about something very small, and then, work in those bigger vacations and time off and all of that. But ideally you're going to need that less if you're able to make more out of the time that you have on a daily basis. Yeah. And I think one other aspect of this that I just want to touch on is to be honest with yourself, mm-hmm. to stop lying to yourself about that I can handle this because I'm supposed to be tough or I'm supposed to be strong. Sometimes it's okay to say, I need to take one less client this week and give myself a break, or I need to take a Friday off or a Monday off or a middle of the day, and I need to read more, or I need to reach out for help, and I need to tell my significant other that like I'm stressed today or I'm feeling anxious today, and to actually start processing through the things that you're doing. It's when we mask this through this level of self-denial and we just want to like pretend things aren't going wrong and they're slowly sliding off the rails and people aren't addressing it. And then it becomes overwhelming. It's become so big that now we can't address it. And this is where suicidal thoughts start to creep in for people. This is where compassion fatigue starts to set in. This is where the altruistic career that you initially wanted to help people has deteriorated you in the process. And so it's learning how to conceptualize what this actually means. And you'll be very disheartened sometimes by getting into your career that you thought was going to be so magnificent, and the reality doesn't match the fantasy. And so now you're stuck with like, okay, maybe my career is not the only place for me to find meaning. And how do I protect myself in these environments from other people? So it's getting rid of self-deception is a huge part of it, and learning to recognize like, look, these things exist, provide outlets for all of them, and incorporate them into your daily life. That's what will help balance the emotional turmoil that you're bringing on from other people who are in pain, who are seeking to you for guidance and help. Like you have a question, an open-ended question on your form sometimes that people just like interpret and give you all kinds of feedback about their personal lives, their relationships. And it's like, yeah, I was asking about your diet. Why are you talking about your husband? You know what I mean? But I leave it open for that, right, for that reason, because I know that I am that person in that space for a lot of our clients. Mm-hmm. And I want to be that person, because all of that was the missing link. When I was just coaching and just focusing on, hey, did you hear your numbers? Did you get water this week? Okay, like that's incredibly important, but there's everything else. It all goes together. And once I realized that piece, I recognize we can do a lot more work. But that work also included a lot more emotional impact on myself. So learning to regulate that was incredibly important. So anybody who is in a field like this, I understand. I certainly don't understand to the level of a first responder or somebody in the military, but it is very emotional, the work that we do. But it is important work, and I'm happy that we can do it. And I know that it is what I am meant to do, because I am a fairly emotional person, and I feel like I can help navigate and guide others through theirs. So I love being able to do it, but I want to be able to do it for a long time. So I think that being able to balance that has been really important for me, and taking these steps. So if anybody who is dealing with this, we hope that this can really help. If you have any other questions, you can submit them through the link below. They're always anonymous. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll also put Rick's contact in the show notes as well. And for more information on coaching and the app that we will be releasing very soon, visit teamlocofit.com, and we will talk to you guys on Wednesday.